Have you ever been in a conversation or have you ever witnessed a conversation where there is deep divide? Today, we are going to learn how to lead during these times of great divide with Cheryl Leong. It is Kat Kim. I am your spiritual mentor and confidence coach. I'm the person that's going to help you overcome your fears, blocks, and shame so that you can step into the best version of yourself and truly make a difference. We are having an amazing conversation with my special guest today. We are talking about how to lead during times of great divide. If you are anyone that is paying attention, clearly we are in times of great divide and we see it everywhere. So I am so excited to bring on my guest, Cheryl Leong.
Hi, everybody. Hello, hello.
I would love for you to introduce yourself. What do you do and how do you serve our community?
So I'm Cheryl. I work as a DEI consultant, a mediator, as well as a therapist, specifically with Asian American mental health, but also LGBTQIA type mental health. But most of my work is DEI consulting, offering workshops. And one of the huge things I do is mediation and helping people work through things, especially when they've made a boo-boo, how to make a recovery when they have. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, mediation, I like when you said that, I was like, holy cow, if there is not a time where we need mediation, I mean, this is the time for it. You teach a workshop called How to Lead During Times of Deep Divide. First of all, you really define diversity in a really special way on your website. Do you mind sharing how you define diversity?
Diversity is really natural, right? You see it everywhere.
Yeah.
If you look at plants, you don't see two plants that look alike. Two human beings, even twins, are going to be slightly different, right?
Yeah.
Snowflakes are all different. So diversity actually is a given in an ecosystem like this planet, in this universe. Two stars are never alike.
Yeah.
But making it inclusive for all these stars to exist is almost impossible because we seem to be in this sort of dividing and conquering and scarcity. So diversity is a given, but making things inclusive, working on equity is what the challenge is.
Wow. I love that. I love that include like that definition of diversity. I never had thought of it like that before. It's something that's natural in our ecosystem. Why do you think it's so hard if it's natural in our ecosystem, why is it so difficult, do you think, from your own view?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look back at human history, we've always functioned somewhat from a place of scarcity. And, even when you look at European colonialism and the way that it divided and conquered, right? It's like this space is not big enough, the two of us. I always think of John Wayne and those early cowboy movies, sort of thinking in terms of like space isn't enough, and who knows what's behind that, right? We can look at all kinds of reasons.
Right.
But even terms like holding space that we all use so much. I mean, what right do we have to hold this space just for us when space could just be holding all of us? And so even that little bit of a shift for me makes all the difference. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts on that.
I love that. Well, I mean, my background is in spirituality. So whenever I hear something that expands my mind even just a little bit more, I just like, it feels so good. And when I feel that way, I know that it's right for me. I feel like there's divine truth in what you're saying. Like, what is this thing about space that we have to hold space for this person or that person or this group or that group? And what if all of space is holding all of us? That's such a beautiful, beautiful thought, and something I think we can take and even meditate on or even think about or journal on. I love that. I really want to talk to you about these conversations that we are seeing online, that we are having online, that are so divisive, right? And you speak specifically on inclusive versus divisive discourse and what that is. I'd love for you to give it to us. Like, what is that? I watched a little bit of your program and I loved your definition of what inclusive discourse is, which is not something that I've heard before. So can you start with what that is?
Sure. So let's look at what traditional European discourse is first. It was from Socrates and those Greek philosophers.
Yeah.
And their idea of discourse was there had to be a winner. There
Ah,
absolutely, the reason you get into a debate is for there to be some winning argument, and that is the ultimate truth.
yeah.
And that's sort of the basis of what this European idea of democracy is.
Mhm.
And we find ourselves in a situation where does that really work right now? Because
Mm.
in times when there's such massive trauma during a
Mhm.
pandemic, when there's systemic racism, when
Yeah.
there's inequities like economic disparities and racial injustice issues and all kinds of things,
Mhm.
this idea almost doesn't seem to work because we don't have meritocracy. It would
Yeah.
work if there was meritocracy, but we don't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for me, inclusive discourse sort of shifts away from saying that there is one singular truth
Mhm.
and that every single narrative matters,
Mhm.
and part of accepting that all narratives matter
Mhm.
doesn't mean that racist narratives or oppressive narratives are okay.
Okay. Yeah.
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 So I mean
So give us an example of what this would look like in a real conversation.
so I'll just maybe jump into a clubhouse conversation I was
Yeah.
having.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So this uh person was it happens to live across the street from me, which is strange, and we just happened to bump into
Mhm.
clubhouse.
Wow.
But he was just like, your family is not okay because it's two women and a kid, and so that is like actually not great for children. Like, this is not the what an ideal family should look like. And of
Wow.
course I was like, that's offensive, right?
Yeah.
That is like oppressive.
Mhm.
um but his humanity still
Mhm.
mattered to me,
Mm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so I just decided to ask questions like, why is this so important to you? And he
Yeah.
says, well, I was raised by a single mother and I didn't have my dad. So if people don't have a dad,
Mm.
that's really the most awful experience growing up.
Yeah.
And so I think that, kind of seeing that there was some humanity behind why he
Mhm.
was thinking the way he was. And I'm not trying to coddle oppressive
Yeah.
speech. I'm not trying to coddle racism or homophobia or transphobia, none of that, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm directly being harmed by his views,
Yeah.
but staying with the conversation long enough, he
Mhm.
was able to see the humanity in my family
Mm.
after a little, after the conversation went on for a little longer.
Mhm.
And his mind actually opened up. And
Wow.
so this discourse wasn't about who was right. This discourse was about finding the humanity in the other.
Mhm.
And I think what unified us was our deep love for children, right?
Mhm.
And our deep love for just feeling loved as a kid.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the unifying point. And so if with every argument, we've got to start looking for exceptions,
Yeah.
because in every argument, there's got to be one small place where we can connect. And
Yeah.
that's what inclusive discourse is, versus that traditional sort of Socratic Greek discourse where someone absolutely has to win.
Yeah. And that would be divisive discourse. Yeah.
Divisive discourse.
Okay. So I love what you're saying here. And I feel like, as far as what we see online, we are far from that. Like, what do we do about that? So basically what I'm hearing from you is like, inclusive discourse is allowing for the differences, but really including the other person that you disagree with, including their humanity in this conversation and this exchange, seeing them as a human, and as you're saying, like, find that one thing that you guys have a common ground on.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
Um, it gets so heated in these conversations, and I think especially with social media, because we're not face to face, we don't see the person, we only see the words. What do you think when you're seeing like conversations just blow up like that on social media?
I see trauma. I think that
Mm.
people who are feeling traumatized by systemic racism,
Mhm.
honestly feeling traumatized from the last presidents,
Yeah.
the last 4 years.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
I mean, it's going to feel like things are hitting a nerve really, really quickly, and we
Yeah.
get into our limbic systems really quickly, just one
Yeah.
trigger word. and we're
Right.
there, right?
Wow.
And so that makes discourse difficult if we're in our traumatic brain.
Yeah.
And so I think, part of the work I also sort of push is not push, but like sort of gently ask people is to track their heart rate as they're
Mhm.
having an argument.
Yeah.
Like if someone has said a word and your heart rate's gone up,
Yeah.
if it's gone over 98, 90 beats per minute, 100 beats per minute,
Yeah.
chances are you're not going to be good in this argument.
Yeah.
Chances are it's not going to work. So you probably need some time away. Or maybe this just isn't the right time to argue. Or maybe this is just not an argument for you. And you've
Mm.
got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of what I'm seeing a lot of.
How do we navigate that type of thing when the conversations are hard? It gets us, our heart rate up. There's probably trauma being triggered, yet we still need to have the conversations. And almost it's like I wish we had Cheryl, on call and like have her come and mediate. But when obviously that's not possible, like it's what I guess I'm saying is I understand that we need to take a break but then what? If we don't have anyone to call us back in and to have and continue the conversation, then we're just leaving the conversation and there's nothing that's resolved from it.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, there's like probably 5 things that I look at, and I'll just go through those 5
Okay.
things
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Well, one, when you talk about this particular issue to this person,
Yeah.
is your body and your mind okay? Like, are
Mm.
you harmed from even having or the emotional burden of talking to someone about this, telling them that they're saying something racist? Like, how does that feel,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Not everybody is in a space where they can take this emotional burden on, and that's a
Yeah.
personal sort of choice first, like, where are your boundaries, right? If it's
Wow.
hurting your body too much and your mind, I'm sorry, but your health and your wellness and your life matters more, right? And so
Yeah.
this may not be the time and place or the person
Yeah.
that is, worthwhile in this moment.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I just want to make that clear for people who are watching, because I've had moments like this too, where on social media, there's a conversation going on, and I just don't have the emotional bandwidth because I have got personal things going on in my life that I'm dealing with. And it just feels like sucking all of the energy out of me to try to convince or talk to somebody. Maybe that's divisive, communication, but to even engage with somebody who clearly in my mind is not going to is not willing to do the same. And so there have been times where I draw my boundaries and I say I'm out. I can't, I don't want to do this right now. And there's a little bit of guilt that comes with it too, like, oh, I should be online all the time and just all over it, but it's not healthy. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So you're saying
Totally.
it's okay to take a break from that and to really pay attention.
Yeah, I think that if
Mhm.
we go on and we're functioning from a place of trauma
Mhm.
and our body is feeling like horrible, I
Mhm.
don't think we're making much of an impact, because
Yeah.
ultimately you want to make an impact. If you're an activist, if you're, using your voice,
Yeah.
you're advocating for something, you want to make an impact. And when your body isn't doing well, you're not going to be very effective.
Mhm.
So I think that's the first thing. And then second of all, who is this person to you?
Oh, good one.
Is
Yeah.
this your spouse? Is
Yeah.
this your cousin? Is this your parent?
Is it someone you don't
Um,
know online?
yeah, is it a troll? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and then understanding who this person is, first of all, in terms of the relationship, and then what's the power dynamic from
Yeah.
a racial, like, is there a racial difference?
Uh-huh.
Right? Is there, in terms of sexual orientation, are both of you different? Gender
Mhm.
identity,
Mhm.
right? Because that power distance is going to contribute to the tension. And so
Mhm.
being just aware of what that power distance is
Mhm.
and breathing through it and saying, either I think I have more privilege here, so I need to tread a lot
Mm.
lightly and be sensitive, or this person obviously is holding a lot more privilege,
Yeah.
so I sort of need to, you know, uh, remind myself that we're both human and we're equals, right?
Yeah.
Even if the world treats us, even though there's all this inequity in this argument, I need to hold myself up and
Yeah.
like, be there.
Yeah.
So being aware of that power distance,
Yeah.
um, And then the third thing would be, where's your circle of influence?
Mm-hmm.
Because you may not have the knowledge, the skills, or the influence on this person. And
Uh-huh.
so if you want to make an impact and your ultimate goal is transformation and change,
Yeah.
then considering, it's sort of that serenity prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
just
Grant me the right. Yeah.
right.
Uh-huh.
And just the wisdom to know the difference, is this within my control or not? Right.
Yeah.
And
What do
I
you
think,
think about I have a question about that. So like knowing and being aware of your circle of influence. What do you think about, so you were talking about specifically what is your circle of influence with this person? But I hear a lot about like stay in your lane and don't talk about things that you don't, you're not educated in. And what I feel like I'm experiencing as I'm observing all of these conversations online, and especially now with the rise in Asian hate crimes, I'm experiencing, the trauma on a different level because it's directly affecting me and my community. And I had this moment, and I'll be completely transparent with you. I just had this moment, Cheryl, where I was like, I don't even know. This is so big that I don't even know if is this my lane? Yes, I'm Asian, but there are people like you. There have been so many amazing Asian American leaders and voices that have been popping up, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like they know what they're talking about. They know way more than me. And I begin to think like, perhaps this is not my lane where I specifically talk about these issues. Of course, I can bring experts on like yourself, and I can amplify your voice and highlight your work. And then but at the same time, it's like, what do I know about trauma? I don't have that trauma informed education like you have, and that I've seen you talk about. Like, trauma is not a joke, and we really need to be clear that when we're dealing with trauma, we need to bring in people who are experts in this area and listen to them. So what do you think about, I know I kind of just said a lot there, but it's kind of my personal experience that I'm going through right now.
yeah, definitely knowing when your own trauma symptoms are surfacing is so
Mhm.
important. Like, I know when mine are surfacing, my muscles are really, sort of stiff,
Yeah,
and I stop breathing all the way in. I just breathe
yeah,
up to here, and I
yeah,
know my heart rate's gone up. I know that I'm sort of in a state of trauma and I can't go on. But
yeah.
right, so I think being aware of your body, your mind, and what it
Mhm.
is and how
Mhm.
trauma affects you
Mhm.
probably would be really, really great for your own wellness and health.
Mhm.
Um, but I think when I talked about, do you have the skills and the knowledge and the
Yeah,
competencies to be in this conversation,
yeah.
sometimes it's your lived experience
Uh-huh.
is all that's needed for
Yeah,
someone to be persuaded, right?
yeah.
Um, you don't
Mm,
have to be a DEI expert all the time or whatever. But what
yeah.
I meant by that is, for example, if you're in a workplace
Mhm.
situation
Mhm.
and some person from some other department has said something
Mhm.
racist,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, it you know, the situation may not be appropriate or even, like, helpful to you and yourself professionally, and maybe the right thing to do is to actually just to go to HR
Mm.
or maybe tell your immediate manager if it's a safe relationship about what's
Yeah,
going on.
yeah.
That's sort of what I was talking about more
Oh, your
is
circle of influence. I see. Okay.
Mhm,
Yeah, thank you for
mhm,
clarifying that. Okay.
mhm.
Right, like, can you actually will it be, not efficient is probably not the right word, but impactful for you to say something in this moment to this person? Is that basic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Right.
sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, "Hey, what you said was really racist."
Yeah.
Like, maybe
Yeah.
that's all that's needed, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you do when you wanna call someone out on their racism, but then you get that trauma, response?
From like, within myself or I see it in the other person?
Like within yourself.
Oh, yeah. So, tracking it is so huge, like, so much of being trauma-informed starts with yourself
Mm,
and understanding how events and situations impact your psyche.
mhm,
And so the first thing is to take deep breaths, and
mhm,
then set a boundary.
Yeah.
I can't be in this conversation right now. We'll come
Right.
back to it later.
Yeah.
And then whatever you do to try to get your heart rate back to a sort of a more even position.
Mhm.
So taking deep breaths, taking a walk,
Yeah.
just self-care, doing what you need to bring your body back to what it is, self-affirmations.
Yeah.
Like, even though that person was a jackass, I'm still I love myself. I love my
Yeah.
culture. I love the color of my skin. Whatever you need, right?
Mhm.
To get yourself back and to see your own humanity and
Yeah.
honor it in that moment.
Yeah. Perfect. So that we had 4 so far?
I think, oops, did we have 4? I lost count.
Yeah. What's the 4th or 5th one, would you say? You said there was 5.
I think, okay, so is it within your influence? And then,
Yep.
will engaging in this cause more harm?
Oh, okay, yeah. To just in general. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a really, that's an interesting question to ask. And I wonder, like, so what do you say? Like, if, I mean, because I think people don't, like the oppressed person who has more privilege, they're not aware that engaging is actually causing a lot of harm. I think so. How do we deal with that aspect?
So I'll give you an example. So I was walking down the street. This is
Yeah.
fairly recent. I want to say
Mhm.
like 3 months ago or something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But there was someone on the street who was homeless,
Mhm.
obviously in need, right?
Mhm.
She was white, and
Mhm.
she called me a racial slur.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
she just went off, like,
Yeah.
and I was looking at her, and I noticed that, she'd been injecting herself, and I'm like,
Yeah.
if I engage in this conversation,
Right. Yeah.
like, it's likely just gonna cause more harm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like, was it even worth it? No, not even worth my time or my psychic
Exactly.
energy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, I might be giving her another reason to go get another hit. Like, it's just it
Mhm.
wasn't worth my time. So sometimes it just causes more harm. Or
Right.
sometimes, I may not have the knowledge around something.
Mhm.
It may be that someone said something about a different group that I'm not a part of.
Mhm.
So I can just like, "Hey, I don't think that's a cool thing to say about that other group of people," right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I may not know enough to get into the details with this person,
Mhm.
and then getting into the details might actually cause even more harm to this other group. So
Right.
I think just sort of being aware of, again, the knowledge, skills, competencies, your
Yeah.
circle of influence, whether or not you're gonna cause more harm, and then taking care of yourself.
Yeah. That's 5. That's number 5, taking care
Yeah,
of yourself. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Which it sounds like it's pretty much the theme in this because, we're talking about trauma responses to, these really, large social issues or racism and all of that. And um, really paying attention to how you're feeling in a conversation and taking care of yourself. What would you say, like, how do you know when to stretch yourself? Let's say I feel nervous, I feel my heart rate going up. But it's actually a time for me to stretch myself and, you know, stand up for myself or somebody. Like, what's the difference between those two?
I'll be super scientific. It's all about your heart rate.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Be scientific. It's okay. Yeah. What do you mean? Yeah.
So, if your heart rate has not gone over 100, it means that you're not hijacked by your limbic system.
Oh,
So your higher functioning, your brain's higher functioning it's still working, right? So you can that's those are moments when you might feel a little anxious, you
yeah.
might feel uncomfortable. Being
Mhm.
uncomfortable is different from being traumatized. Like there's a
Ah,
whole line. So if your heart rate is still within, it might have gone up a little bit, but
yeah.
it hasn't gone like, to the point
Okay.
where, over 100, that's called being emotionally flooded.
Okay.
That's when you know.
I just want to repeat. Being uncomfortable is different from being would you say
Traumatized.
traumatized. Being uncomfortable is different from being traumatized. And we know that you're traumatized when your heartbeat goes above 100 beats. So how do we measure that? Like,
Okay. I think if you start to track your breathing more often, okay, if you want to use technology, just get yourself a little watch, one of those little
right.
watch
And
things, and then
I think
just
a lot of
track it.
people have that actually. Like they have the Fitbits or whatever.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
the old-fashioned way is just getting your own pulse
Yeah.
and timing 30 seconds and then multiplying it by 2.
2. Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I would do this just on a regular basis, just so you know your basic heart rate.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so you know when it's gone up a little bit, and
Yeah.
you know when you're traumatized, right? You're emotionally flooded and you can't function. So
That's
that's
interesting.
when it's within it, when it's within like that range where your brain is still sort of able to function
Yeah.
in a way that isn't traumatized, isn't fight or flight. That
Mhm.
means you're capable of stretching yourself, right?
Wow.
That means
Wow.
you're capable of taking on a new behavior and learning and like trying something new. That's when you're capable of doing that.
That's
So,
so interesting.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's good. Okay, so the it's very scientific. Basically, if you're over 100 beats per minute and all you have to do is check for 30 seconds, and that's easy to do. Anyone just does this. You count the heartbeats, you multiply it by 2. If you are 99 beats, then that means it's time for you to stretch yourself, right?
Yeah.
Wow. If it's 101 and up, then
Yeah.
that actually means there's parts of your brain that are shutting down and you are not able to respond
Yeah. Yeah.
um, in a positive, healthy way.
Mhm.
I wonder, gosh, that is such a skill I feel like should be taught in grade school, Cheryl. Like,
It should.
my goodness. Like,
Mhm.
how come I'm 40 something and I'm just learning about like how to tune into my body and my, heart rate? That's incredible. I think that would be so powerful if we all knew how to tune into our body and to be aware of this conversation is actually triggering a trauma response and I need to shut down and I need to leave. Or is this a time for me to practice my voice and my beliefs and step out more and speak up more? I feel like there's a lot of trauma that's happening, in the online space in particular that we don't even know because all we see are the words. But I feel like behind the words is a human being and they are experiencing something that probably is very traumatizing. And I'm not saying just um, one side or one group of people, but I think I think it's across the board. I think more people are feeling trauma than we realize. I bet you see it. You see know it. You see it and you know it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah. What
Mhm.
do what are your thoughts when you see these types of conversations and you see, I mean, clearly the rise in Asian hate crimes and all of that. I've heard you share a couple stories now about your own experiences of being dehumanized and like, how, what's your outlook on all of that coming from your background?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew what the roots of racism were. There's so many
Yeah,
theories, but, I think that we're basically getting scapegoated,
yeah,
right, um, for a global health crisis.
yeah,
Um, I mean, it's not too dissimilar from what happened post 9/11 for many of our Muslim,
yeah,
siblings, and many of whom are Asian, right?
yeah, right.
And there's something about a mass trauma combined with a scapegoat,
Yeah,
something about that brings up the worst hate.
yeah,
And I think we'll see this for some time.
yeah,
We're going to have to sort of pull in all our resources to manage it as a community. We're not even a single community. We're so many different communities.
yeah.
Um, One other thing I'm seeing is just divisiveness even amongst Asians, and
Yes. Yeah.
um, we're we're not exactly on the same page in terms of how to deal with
Yeah.
this problem, how to deal
Mhm.
with this racism. We don't even have a singular method of doing it.
Yeah.
Um, so many times I get, no matter how hard I try, doing my activism or working on Black Asian solidarity or whatever,
Yeah.
I will still get some hate mail in my DM.
Yeah.
Someone completely disagreeing with how I do it, and I think that I think there's some sort of major lesson here for us
Yeah.
as who we are in the API
Yeah.
world, and I think we're about to learn it. So, well, let's wait and see.
I know, I know. It's really hard for me to see so much divisiveness, especially like coming from a place of like just, my background is in spirituality, and I do see the humanness in everybody. I do see that we come from the same source, and then for us to in this physical world to hate on each other so much is really difficult. And for me, like turning on my cell phone these days is subjecting myself to violence now, because you turn on social media and you just scroll and you see someone who's been harmed or killed, whether they be an Asian person or a Black person, and it's just it's a lot. And I do feel a trigger of like I have to count now. Is that trauma, or what is it? But it's certainly not healthy, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like we're being so exposed to so much of it. Um, and so sometimes when I think about this issue, I feel really like hopeless. Not like I'm depressed, hopeless, but like, man, what the fuck do we do about all
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's three types of trauma,
Mm.
and so the first kind is like a singular event, right, where
Mhm.
we directly experience something.
Mhm.
I think what you're describing is vicarious trauma, or
Mhm.
secondary trauma, where you're hearing about some other person experiencing it, and it may be that you see your face in this other
Yeah.
person's face, or
Yeah.
they look like a friend of yours,
Yeah.
and so trauma symptoms, come up for
Yeah.
you when you're looking at these images or these stories. And then the
Yeah.
third kind is what I call systemic or structural trauma, where it's
Right.
daily. You
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
your existence in a system that is violent, structurally violent towards you.
Mhm.
Um, so your sort of poverty, for example, is structural
Mhm.
violence,
Mhm.
and that's daily trauma, right?
Yeah.
The trauma of not having enough money and worrying and being in that
Yes.
adrenaline state. So
Yeah.
yeah,
All coming from, I think, colonization and extractive capitalism, and it dates back to since the beginning of time. And I
I
think,
love it when you say this stuff.
and I also think there's another level of trauma. I'll just add a fourth one, which is generational trauma,
Yeah.
that our parents and our ancestors, they directly experienced that first level of trauma that you're talking about. And the impact that it made on themselves, and the DNA has been passed down to us. And
Mhm.
that's something I think we don't even know what's going on, because it's so in the unconscious mind.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a whole, like, epigenetics to trauma now. Although
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I read a book about that, the epigenetic. I read a book that was talking about the epigenetics of trauma, and I have personally experienced that, and I didn't know that until last couple of years. Um, I just really want to honor the work that you're doing. I come from the coaching world. I come from spiritual leadership and all of that. But one thing I really realized in the last even just the last year, is that the work that I do is very, very different from the work that you do as a trauma informed therapist. You are dealing with things that I am not clearly not licensed, but not what's the word? Not capable, not I don't have the I don't have the skills. And I don't think I want to. You know, that's the one thing I realized too. I was like, God, I really respect the type of work that you're doing. And I think we need to really highlight that more. And that we need more people like you doing what you do.
My Asian values prevent me from fully accepting on the surface, but on the inside, I'm totally accepting it. Thank you.
I really mean it. I think we really need it as a culture and as a collective. Man, we just so much healing that we are going through, and that I think I agree with you. There's going to be more coming up that we've just barely scratched the surface on all of this.
Well, I mean, I follow your work, and I think that there's two sides to trauma. There are the
Mhm.
symptoms
Mhm.
and the suffering, but
Mhm.
then there's also post-traumatic growth, which is a
Yeah,
whole area of research, and I feel like your work really helps people grow the
yeah,
growth part of trauma, the
yeah,
spiritual parts.
yeah.
Um, I feel like your work really helps people
Oh,
in that sense.
oh,
So
thank you for that.
yeah.
I will say thank you. That's good to know. Yeah, I think that's my lane. And basically, what I'm saying is that I really clearly see that there are different, you know, the journey is not just one big journey, but there's different phases and all of that. And we have people such as yourself and such as me and so many other coaches and healers and therapists who like specialize in different areas. I think it's going to take a community of people to get through this.
Mhm.
What is one thing, my last question for you is, what is one thing that, you know, we can take away? Like, because I know that we will come across a conversation again. We will witness a conversation. So what is one thing that we can remember? What do we want to take away that we can bring more inclusive discourse about? Like, what's that one question that we want to ask ourselves in that moment?
Um, that truth lies in our basic humanity and
Mm.
not the righteousness of an argument.
Oh, oh, so good. The truth lies in our humanity and
Mhm,
not the righteousness of our argument.
mhm,
Right? That's basically the truth is in our humanity and not us being in, and not in our ego, not in being right
mhm,
or wrong.
mhm, mhm.
Oh, that's really, really beautiful. And I think that is going to be our challenge. If we can bring ourselves back to that question, I think there's always going to be room for growth. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Where can we direct people to? Do you have we have a website that we linked, and do you have any programs or anything that's coming up?
I have a psychological safety program coming up.
Oh,
If you want to be a more inclusive leader,
mhm,
these are research-based behaviors that you can engage in so that your team or your business, the people who work for your business, feel more included and feel a sense of belonging with you.
mhm.
It'll be an 8-hour program sometime in July. That's coming up soon. So if you follow me and my website, I'll be putting it out pretty soon.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. And give me the links so we can link them. And thank you so much for being with me today and
Thank
sharing
you.
your wisdom and yours and everything. Thank you, Cheryl. We'll
Thank
see
you,
you next
Kat
time.
Kim.